We'll begin, we may have covered this yesterday, but we'll begin with the first verse of chapter 16. 6:16:1. Shukadev Goswami said, "My dear King Parikshit, by his mystic power, the great sage Narada brought the dead son into the vision of all the lamenting relatives, and then spoke as follows. Narada Muni said, O living entity, O good fortune unto you, just see your father and mother, all your friends and relatives are overwhelmed with grief because of your passing away. Because you died untimely, the balance of your lifetime still remains. Therefore, you may enter your body and enjoy the remainder of your life, surrounded by your friends and relatives, accept the royal throne and all the opulences given by your father. By the mystic power of Narada Muni, the living entity re-entered his dead body for a short time and spoke in reply to Narada Muni's request. He said, according to the results of my fruitive activities, I, the living being, transmigrate from one body to another, sometimes going to the species of the demigods, sometimes to the species of lower animals, sometimes among the vegetables, and sometimes to the human species. Therefore, in which birth were these my mother and father? No one can actually be my mother and father. How can I accept these two people as my parents? In this material world, which advances like a river that carries away the living entity, all people become friends, relatives, and enemies in due course of time. They also act neutrally. They meditate, mediate. They despise one another. And they act in many other relationships nonetheless. Despite these various transactions, no one is permanently related. So now some metaphors. Just as gold and other commodities are continually transferred from one place to another in due course of purchase and sale, so the living entity, as a result of his fruitive activities, wanders throughout the entire universe, being injected into various bodies in different species of life by one kind of father after another. That metaphor is used in many places. Who can say this is someone's gold and then it's transferred and transferred? It's gold is gold. It's not this someone's gold. A few living entities are born in the human species and others are born as animals. Although both are living entities, their relationships are impermanent. An animal, so like gold, an animal may remain in the custody of a human being for some time, and then the same animal may be transferred to the possession of other human beings. As soon as the animal goes away, the former proprietor no longer has a sense of ownership. As long as the animal is in his possession, he certainly has an affinity for it, but as soon as the animal is sold, the affinity is lost. Even though one living entity becomes connected with another because of a relationship based on bodies that are perishable, the living entity is eternal. Actually, it is the body that is born or lost, not the living entity. One should not accept that the living entity takes birth or dies. The living being actually has no relationship with so-called fathers and mothers, as long as he appears as the son of a certain father and mother. As a result of his past fruitive activities, he has a connection with the body given by that father and mother. Thus he falsely accepts himself as their son and acts affectionately. After he dies, however, the relationship is finished. Under these circumstances, one should not be falsely involved with jubilation and lamentation. The living entity is eternal and imperishable because he actually has no beginning and no end. He never takes birth or dies. He is the basic principle of all types of bodies, yet he does not belong to the bodily category. The living being is so sublime that he is equal in quality to the Supreme Lord. Nonetheless, because he is extremely small, he is prone to be illusioned by the external energy, and thus he creates various bodies for himself according to his different desires. Like a Bhagavad Gita class given by a little baby. For this living entity, no one is dear, nor is anyone unfavorable. He makes no distinction between that which is his own and that which belongs to anyone else. He is one without a second. In other words, he is not affected by friends and enemies, well-wishers, or mischief-mongers. He is only an observer, a witness of different qualities of men. This is his last words. The Supreme Lord, Atma, the creator of cause and effect, does not accept the happiness and distress that result from the fruitive actions. He is completely independent of having to accept a material body, and because he has no material body, he is always neutral. The living entities, being part and parcel of the Lord, possess his qualities in a minute quantity. Therefore, one should not be affected by lamentation. And mind you, King Chitraketu is hearing all this. Thus, enlightened by the instructions of the Brahmanas, Angira and Narada, King Chitraketu became fully aware of spiritual knowledge. As an elephant becomes free from the muddy reservoir of water, King Chitraketu came out of the dark well of family life. The king bathed in the water of the Yamuna, and according to prescribed duties, he offered oblations of water to the forefathers and demigods. Very gravely controlling his senses and mind, he then offered his respects and obeisances to the sons of Lord Brahma. These two sages are sons of Lord Brahma, Angira and Narada. Thereafter, being very much pleased with Chitraketu, who was a self-controlled devotee and surrendered soul, Narada, the most powerful sage, spoke to him the following transcendental instructions, which we read already. He gave him this nice mantra that starts, Om Namastubhyam Bhagavate, and so forth. There's in the verses that follow, there's as one might expect, further clarification of the Lord is Sambandh again, what are his features and qualities, and the relationships of his potencies with him, and so forth. And an appeal that just, let me offer my respectful obeisance to him. Please protect me. And standard kinds of appeals. Lots of sambandha again. I'll read. We will read through text 24, starting with 22. As pots made completely of earth are situated on earth after being created and are transformed into earth again when broken, this cosmic manifestation is caused by the Supreme Brahman, situated in the Supreme Brahman, and annihilated in the same Supreme Brahman. Therefore, since the Supreme Lord is the cause of Brahman, let us offer our respectful obeisances. Let us offer him our respectful obeisances. The Supreme Brahman emanates from the Supreme Personality of Godhead and expands into the sky. Although untouched by anything material, it exists within and without. Nonetheless, the mind, intelligence, senses, and living force can neither touch him nor know him. I offer unto him my respectful obeisances. More metaphor. As iron has the power to burn when made red hot in the association of fire, so the body, senses, living force, mind, and intelligence, although merely lumps of matter, can function in their activities when infused with a particle of consciousness by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As iron cannot burn unless heated by fire, the bodily senses cannot act unless favored by the Supreme Brahman. Where are we going to get this knowledge other than in the Bhagavatam? Where is there a place to find this knowledge other than the Bhagavatam? Within the Vedas, obviously, there's lots of understanding other than within the Bhagavatam. But the Bhagavatam is specifically under the order of Narada, making clear the connection of everything with the source of everything. Not to say that's not there in the other parts of the Vedas, but it's like the lens is really in focus. It's not blurry. Very clear, very sharp picture. And everything means everything. In so many places, the relationship, sambandha, of material creation emanating from its source is being vividly described. I remember someone sent to me a link of, I can't even remember his name, one of these celebrated atheist professor, scholar, people, public speaker, about speeches he gave and his views on life. One outstanding thing I remember from all of that was his declaring in in an angry voice, where's the evidence? No pramana. And that which doesn't have its pratyaksha pramana, he can't accept. But then where do you take that? Well, you make inference. Prior to what we can perceive as a cause. And the cause is such and such. And it's inference. It's not pramana. So pratyaksha, anuman pramana. That's his business, is making inference, whatever the different inferences are, the different isms and philosophies are. And then there's Shabda Pramana. And then there's Aparusheya Shabda Pramana. And then there's the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now we know from Bhagavad Gita and from practical experience, not Manushanam Sahasreshu Kasya Jatati Sitaye. Not so many people are really interested. There are people that are interested, but they're not, there's lots of people that aren't really interested, although they say they're interested. So there's all kinds, there's a big variety of personalities who, don't really, whatever. They're not really interested in making that connection with the cause of all causes. And of those who have an interest and have achieved an understanding of what is Brahman, hardly one knows Krishna. And it's not a failure on our parts, it's just the nature of living entities don't really have such an interest, and especially amplified in the age of Kali. And misinformation, disinformation, and distraction and lack of interest. And here we are, swimming in the river of Kali Yuga, trying to make a connection with the personality of Godhead. And our resources, other than this descending knowledge, our other resources are pretty weak. Pretty weak. And even if we make some nice start, because of whatever the various impetus is for making a nice start, 4 types of pious people render service unto me. It's reaching that stage that is spoken of in Bhagavad Gita. Hardly one knows me in truth, and because knowing Krishna in truth means no more birth and death. So, is it for sure? And people ask. I've had people ask. And we can go back to Godhead. I was having this discussion with one man, a nice gentleman, a mode of goodness gentleman. I hear from devotees, go back to Godhead in this one lifetime, and they're convinced. And I'm not so convinced. I'm convinced it's probably going to take multiple lifetimes because that's just the way it is. Because we're slow and manda samanda matayo, and so both positions are defensible. But there is a potency within the Bhagavatam and the bhakti process to completely cleanse. But how is that going to be effected? It's going to take a very strong, sincere effort. And, a lot of scrub-a-dub, a lot of cleansing and purification, and that cleansing and purification means on the positive side and the negative side. Negative side is letting go, and the positive side to keep going forward. And as much as we do both, let go of the coverings and continue, for an entire lifetime to take shelter of this transcendental sound vibration. To that degree, in this one lifetime, we can get there. And the Bhagavatam is meant for that. Maximum elevation, purification, according to our capacity. And whatever it is that is gained, it's to our eternal credit, an eternal asset. So no loss. But something that really helps, there's two somethings that really help, is an eagerness to receive, and then the acknowledgement of how elevated is this Bhagavatam. I mean, let me receive this different than this atheist scientist. Where's the proof? This is our proof. The Bhagavatam itself is the proof. Aparusheya Shabda Praman. And and without going further too much, evidenced by great stalwart personalities that have given their lives to its message and expanding its message and expounding the teachings within the message, and perfected souls, great acharyas. Just listening this morning, Prabhupada was giving a lecture in 1966, April 1966, in 26 2nd Avenue, New York, to an audience, all new people, and his emphasis was not one can make it back to Godhead in this lifetime, but he was making reference that the knowledge that's in the Bhagavatam is accepted by all stalwart acharyas. And he goes through and lists the 12 Mahajans. And other than the 12 Mahajans, those in disciplic succession. Anyway, it's authority that we can trust. And it'll take us, it's evidence, unlike, seeing kind of evidence. Where's the evidence? It's hearing evidence. And one who trusts that sound vibration can be carried by that sound vibration to that place. So we're hearing what the same thing that Chitraketu heard. And Chitraketu had a mantra, just like we have mantras. Of course, Hare Krishna mantra, but those are Brahminical initiated, and another Gayatri mantra, just like this mantra that Narada gave. Go back and read it. Om Namo Bhagavate Mahapurushaya Mahanubhavaya Mahavibhuti, etc. Wait a minute. Yeah, here it is. Yes. Text 18. I went ahead. That was text 25. We'll get there. Om Namastubhyam Bhagavate Vasudevaya Dhimahi. So just that, as the word Dhimahi indicates Gayatri, just like in the first verse of the Bhagavatam, Satyam Param Dhimahi. And Prabhupada explains this word Dhimahi indicates this is the Bhagavatam's a commentary on Gayatri Mantra, just by that word Dhimahi. So this is a type of Gayatri Mantra with all the elements of a Gayatri Mantra given by Narada to King Chitraketu. So there's the mantra, and then the explanation of the mantra is within the verses. What's the mantra indicating? So we have our mantras, and we have the Bhagavatam. We have the means of gaining clarity, realization, etc., of the personality of Godhead and the relationship of all things with Him. We're far from the realization, but the means to get there is being made available. And again, our great acharyas have this direct experience. How eager are we for that direct experience? I mean, this is a topic that I'll be discussing over the weekend. The distinction between duty and spontaneous attraction. Duty will help purify. Duty is to purify. And spontaneous attraction is a blessing when purification has matured, and or there's just some descending mercy that comes and when someone becomes spontaneously attracted. We'll hear some more as we go forward. Let's see if there's some discussion. 8:00. Yesterday there was a lot of discussion, so I'm leaving time. Tomorrow we'll start with text 25.
So Maharaj, this is from yesterday's comment on the understanding of Sambandha Gyan during japa or chanting. Now, how do we know that we are in real Sambandha Gyan during japa? I mean, understanding that we are this, not this body, and reading before we start japa, that understanding is there, but is that enough?
You want more than enough? It's a beginning. So it's like the point of a needle and the shaft of a needle and the head of the needle. It's a beginning. And from the beginning comes the rest.
Is there a way to cultivate the rest, or it will happen?
Well, by hearing. And it's, and hearing means purification and then acting according to that understanding. Even when we're hearing and we're acting according to understanding, we are dependent and remain dependent. So revelation comes by effort and mercy. And so, is it enough? Well, it's a beginning. Then you continue with effort and expectation of mercy, calling out for mercy, reaching out for mercy. And then it's, according to the reciprocation, we're dependent. On the one hand, bhakti is inherent. On the other hand, we're dependent on descending mercy to awaken that inherent bhakti. Just a sidebar. There's this debate going on amongst scholarly Prabhus, whether bhakti is inherent in the jiva or not. And those that say yes have their authority, and those that say no have their authority, and they're debating. So I'm just sharing. It's very clear to me, I'm not poo-pooing those who have a different view, but it's very clear to me, bhakti is inherent in the jiva. So that's why I said what I said. It's just a little footnote to what I said. I'm honoring, I'm acknowledging openly there are persons that don't hold this view. I don't know how many, but there's some. And they're speaking, and they're writing, and they're thising, and they're thating, and putting forward their points of view. But so we make effort. My understanding is very clear. The authority for that understanding is very clear. The innate, inherent, that's a nice word, inherent. It's a property within a jiva that's already there to be awakened. The awakening is necessary. It's, just your question, is that enough? The awakening begins, and then the awakening continues. And the awakening process is the same process. Although it's already there within, it needs to be awakened. And the awakening process is these two, effort and mercy. And we keep the alignment of the hearts, wanting to know, wanting to make that connect, wanting to reawaken our forgotten relationship with Krishna, and not become complacent with whatever the complacency might look like for somebody. I'm not suffering like I was before, or whatever it is that it prompts complacency. So bhakti has to, as bhakti awakens, the effort doesn't subside to be connected with Krishna and be conscious always. So that's a long response to your question. Is it enough? It's ongoing. Something else?
There's one more question.
Go ahead.
So, on this discussion yesterday, so you gave the example of Maharaj Yudhishthir, Maharaj Ambarish, and the fact that Krishna is very kind, and he gives opulence to those who are not attached to it.
Yes.
And I was discussing this with my wife after going home, and so there was some discussion back and forth.
About?
And, so
how much opulence you have?
So she was saying that is for pure devotees. So how do we see it in context to pure non-devotees or practicing devotees?
Well, for non-devotees, it's a totally different set of rules. It's karma-driven, guna and karma-driven. That's all. But now, for the practicing devotees, my answer is going to be, Krishna reciprocates according to the desire of the living entity. Yayatam prapadyante. So Krishna may, depending upon the desire of the living entity, seek something that's not exclusively connection with him, whatever that something is. Whatever that something is. Let me do well in my occupation. let my daughter get entrance into a good college, or whatever. And yayatamam prapadyante. So it's not that let my business transactions be successful. It's not that Krishna won't let it happen or Krishna will let it happen simply by some rule. Like, like this other one from yesterday. But so we as even practicing devotees are encouraged to trust, repose our faith in Krishna that Krishna knows. And if things go well, Krishna knows. If things don't go well, Krishna knows. And then that's on a deeper level, that's one's regard for Krishna. Mam prapadyante. So it's quite flexible from Krishna's side. And, our experience amongst the practicing devotees, there's lots of variegatedness of what happens in devotees' lives successful. I'm thinking, as I'm giving you the answer, very nice couple, and they're getting smashed in their business enterprise department of their life. It's not because Krishna's giving them some test. Krishna's taking away. Krishna's, helping them to become more dependent upon him and less dependent upon the joy of being successful, because there was joy of being successful for some time, and now it's not joy being successful for this present period of time. It's not Krishna's tormenting them. Anyway, so it's a relationship with Krishna dynamic. And then when we get to these higher stages, like the higher stage of Sudama having nothing, and then Krishna giving Sudama everything. But because Sudama's disposition was what it was before and after, the commentary says he continued sleeping on the floor. He didn't accept and become the enjoyer of worldly opulence. Now, it doesn't say anything about his wife, because his wife's disposition was the same. But her main concern was my husband should not be, so skinny that his veins are sticking out. So, yayatamam prapadyante. But you can go, when you go back, you can discuss with your wife that a verse that I refer to a lot because it's relevant for devotees' lives. Yastvindra gopam atavendra mahosva karma bandhanurupam palabhajanam atonoti karmani nirdahita kintu cha bhakti bhajam. For those who are devotees, Bhaktisiddhanta's translation, his language is Krishna for the Bhakti Bhajam folks, those who are practicing devotees, not the perfect, but practicing devotees. Krishna it's a different set of rules. He reciprocates with them in such a way, the very root of their material existence is taken away, uprooted. And that he identifies the root is ignorance, and he gives some adjective, something desires, vicious desires or unwholesome desires or something like that. Desire that is other than Shuddha Bhakti. And Krishna acts with those devotees in such a way. So whether they have opulence or don't have opulence, what he's doing is he's helping that not there yet folks, that's all of us, become free from the root of material existence, which is material desire, which is driven by ignorance. Ignorance leaves ignorant desires. So that verse is the answer to your discussion with your wife. It's a very short purport. Just meditate on it. It has a lot. Something else?
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Maharaj, yesterday we discussed about renunciation when we were talking about Sudama, 2 types of renunciation.
Yeah.
One with the fear of getting entangled in the reactions.
The affairs of material life.
Yeah. And the other one, not liking it at all, dislike towards material opulence.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I was just trying to understand, Guru Maharaj. Either of it, I mean, if at all, one day if somebody gets renunciation, anyone is problematic or anyone is okay, which is better, or I just wanted to understand.
The frame of your question is clear. The question is not clear. What's the question? Articulate the question clearly, because I can say anything about that topic. But what's your question? You want to hear more about it? Is that what your question is, essentially? Well, the kind of renunciation of the second category is extremely rare, almost non-existent in our modern context. Largely, it's aversion. Again, just this morning, in this lecture to the 26 Second Avenue audience in 1966, Prabhupada was speaking about the 12 Mahajans, and he was explaining about the 4 Kumaras. My sense, I mean, I don't want to interpret Prabhupada's intention, but my sense was he was speaking to the audience by saying, when Brahma asked the Kumaras to help populate the universe with good praja, they didn't want, that meant they had to become married. They don't want the entanglement. And so, they declined, which made Brahma angry, etc. So, not wanting the entanglement is different than the Kumaras. No, there may have been, because of Jnana Shakti, understanding the right position of the soul is not being involved in material affairs. But they like Sudama, although he was married, he was not inclined. So that's very rare, very rare. But there are some persons who are, by nature, not inclined. I mean, my thoughts right now are going to Gaur Govinda Maharaj. And I remember visiting Bhubaneswar long ago. We went to visit Jagannath Puri. There's a group of us from New York, because Gaur Govinda Maharaj's assistant was Bhagavat Das, who had previously been a Hare Krishna devotee from Brooklyn. I mean, he was a Brooklyn-born young man. So we went to visit Puri because he was in Bhubaneswar. We went to visit Bhubaneswar. At the time we went to visit Bhubaneswar, I was shocked. It was just a very simple fence around a piece of land that was out in the middle of nowhere. There was nothing. And the only thing that was a little cottage that was right in the corner of the property where Gogovinda Maharaj stayed and was doing his translation of Bhagavatam from English to Oriya language. He wasn't there when we visited. But, it's just like he was naturally inclined in that mood of detachment. And he lived his life that way, even when he became a sannyasi and guru and so forth and so on. Well, he became a sannyasi very quickly, but, he lived very simply because that was his inclination. And that's rare. More common is aversion. Because I don't want the entanglement of things. And I could give some other examples, but rather than the anecdotal, it's rare. There are examples, but it's rare, where it's just the natural inclination of a living entity rather than aversion. Prabhupada was training his followers to be able to accept either position, favoring the simplicity, but when there was opulence, to not be indulgent in the opulence. That was a principle he was trying to train us in. The fact of the matter is, when there's opulence, the mind becomes agitated, very commonly. And that's it, it's so it's this is the first kind of detachment. I don't want to become attracted to opulence, so I want to say averse. And there's some kind of protection, but it's not on the same platform, and it's very unstable. Something else? Online. Let's go over here. Over here.
This question is from Amara Mataji.
Keep going.
The question is, from childhood, we hear from elders about Hari Icha. Something good happens or bad, everything is Lord's will. We cannot let go when we are attached, but if that object is just taken away, we have no option but to let go, considering it as Lord's will. I'm trying to understand how this knowledge from Srimad Bhagavatam will aid to the understanding of Hari Icha, Lord's will.
I'm trying to understand your question, because how it will help is just by, it's Purana, so there's history, and then the principle is weaved or exhibited within the history. And we see the example of elevated souls that accept reversals, no problem, as the will of Hari. And we see the consequence of those that don't. And, Indra is one of them. Right within the story that we're reading. And, at least the evening discussion, the lesson that Vritrasura is giving to Indra doesn't, Indra stays within the position of, my desires, not Hari's desires. And that's why he's a demigod. Although he's a Vaishnav, an elevated Vaishnav. So my answer is, within the pages of the Bhagavatam, we're getting examples, historical examples of both. And we're getting in the Bhagavatam, the main focus is the personality of Godhead. And so we're getting purification just by hearing those messages of his devotees. At least the opportunity is there by that sound vibration. That's how it'll help us.
This question is from Radha Vallabha Prabhu. We heard that the living entity is only observer without being impacted by friends, enemies, mischief mongers. Does the devotee reach this state of consciousness at Nishta or Bhava stage?
Well, your question is a little bit like the very first question. Is that enough? And it's gradual. It's not fully mature even in the Bhava stage. It's less than that in the Nishta stage. It's progressive. And when it's matured fully, that's the Prema stage. Next. That's it. Anything else? You have something?
Maharaj, when we read our Srimad Bhagavatam every day, what should be our consciousness? Sometimes we will be happy, distressed, and sometimes, tired. So how should, what should be our consciousness every day when we read our Bhagavatam?
Open and receiving. Should and what the reality of our situation is are two different things sometimes, but that's the should, because that was your question. And even if you're not in the should, do it anyways. If you're not in that zone, do it anyways, because it'll help you. You follow? Okay. Back over here. And that's it for this morning.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I don't know if this is a question, but something that I've been thinking about. Krishna is so kind and personal. Who am I? That the whole discussion about how tiny am I when you talk about that.
Yes.
But he still notices my complacency when I have a little bit of material, success, joy.
Yes.
And he tweaks my situation so that I start to get distressed a little bit. And while I want to, know him, love him, serve him, I'm also I like the comforts that I have in my life. And I'm thinking, about the journey as to how renounced or where do I need to be in order to be accepted back into spiritual sky, into Goloka, or because things like, Raghunath Das Goswami's renunciation, that scares me.
How many follow that standard? That's his thing. That's his one of his outstanding characteristics. So, where do you go from here? Sounds like your question. And a short description is acceptance and progress. You know what that means, right? I'm here. Let me accept this is where I am. Here's some role models and some teachings that are where I want to be. And I'm here. Acceptance and identification of the goal, and then make steps in the direction of the goal that are doable ones, and then sustain them. Subset of that response is dial up the absorption in the spiritual dimension, and as that charge starts to take its effect, you start to dial down, not, give things up, but the sense of finding enjoyment in those things will subside. When there's a higher taste, the lesser taste subsides. So be conscious in both ends of the spectrum, the dialing up and the dialing down. Anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjanam. And those are limbs of surrender. So the focus is surrender. And then there's activities that strengthen that, enhance, enrich, give spiritual strength to the surrender muscle. And you do that regularly. We're coming into a new year. People like these New Year's resolutions. So, what is it in the acceptance and progress, not only progress, but also acceptance and progress? What would be a reasonable effort for me? And you don't have to reach the goal, at the end of January. Just make some progress. And Krishna will see your effort to connect with him more and to diminish, and he'll help. He'll smile and he'll help. And that's one of the most outstanding things of all of this is the sense of a stronger connection. The experience of a stronger connection, a palpable experience of a stronger connection. Krishna's help. Even though we're tiny and etc. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.